Next up, we're going to dive into the world of economics and politics, and I'm calling this episode Tariffs and Tribulations, the Trump administration's gamble with inflation. Today, we're discussing the proposed 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports and how it could affect the U.S. economy. Joining me is a newcomer to the topic, but eager to learn, my friend here. So let's get started. The tariffs, if imposed, would be a significant increase in costs for construction and manufacturing industries, which could lead to higher prices for consumers and businesses. What are your initial thoughts on this policy decision?
That sounds like it could be really bad. Wouldn't that just make everything more expensive? Like if I'm building a house and the cost of steel goes up, doesn't that mean my house is going to cost more too? And what about cars and appliances and all the other things that use steel and aluminum?
Exactly. You're thinking like an economist already. The tariffs would increase the cost of raw materials, which would then be passed on to consumers through higher prices. It's a classic example of a supply chain disruption. And it's not just construction and manufacturing that would be affected, but also industries like automotive, aerospace, and even renewable energy.
Right. So, if I'm a business owner and my costs go up, I have to either absorb those costs or pass them on to my customers. But what if my customers can't afford the higher prices? Won't that just hurt my business even more? And, what about the whole idea of free trade? Isn't that supposed to make things cheaper and better for everyone?
Great points. The tariffs would indeed disrupt the global supply chain and could lead to a trade war, which would be detrimental to many businesses. And you're right, free trade is meant to increase competition, reduce prices, and improve quality. But in this case, the Trump administration is taking a protectionist stance, trying to shield domestic industries from foreign competition.
I see. But isn't that kind of like, putting a band-aid on a broken leg? Like if the problem is that American steel and aluminum companies can't compete with foreign producers, shouldn't we be looking at why that is instead of just slapping tariffs on everyone?
Laughs. I love the analogy. Yes, you're right. Tariffs might provide temporary relief, but they don't address the underlying issues. And in fact, many economists argue that tariffs can have unintended consequences, such as higher prices for consumers, reduced economic growth, and even job losses.
So, what about the argument that the tariffs would help American workers? Wouldn't that be a good thing?
Great question. While it's true that some American workers in the steel and aluminum industries might benefit from the tariffs, the overall impact on employment is likely to be negative. Many more jobs are at risk in industries that rely on imported raw materials, such as construction, manufacturing, and automotive.
Oh wow, I didn't think of it that way. It's like we're trying to help one group of people, but we might end up hurting a lot more people in the process. What about other countries? Will they just sit back and let us impose these tariffs?
Laughs. Not likely. Other countries will likely retaliate with their own tariffs on American goods, which would escalate the trade war, and that's when things can get really messy.
Whoa, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. We're already seeing inflation go up, and now we're adding fuel to the fire. Doesn't that just seem like a really bad idea?
Smiling. Well, it's certainly a contentious issue. The Federal Reserve is already cautious about cutting interest rates given the current inflation data, and with these tariffs, they might need to keep rates high for even longer to control price pressures.
I see. So, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place? Either we impose tariffs and risk higher prices, or we don't and maybe our industries can't compete.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. But one thing is certain, the proposed tariffs will have far-reaching consequences for the U.S. economy, and it's essential to carefully weigh the pros and cons before making any decisions.
Right? I think I'm starting to get it. It's like, we need to consider all the ripple effects and unintended consequences before we make a move. This is way more complicated than I thought.